Okay, well, like I say, no work today, so it gives me an opportunity to hang out with my Rocky cat. He was just outside for a few minutes. He doesn't stay out very long when it's cold, though. He doesn't like the cold very much, you know. Um, anyway, but yeah, I'll tell you a few stories about our landlady when I was a kid. Now, I actually got along all right with her most of the time. I mean, she was different, eh? She was a bit of a kook, I guess, and I don't know, I've always been a bit of a kook, so maybe that's why I got along with her like I did. But anyway, she grew up quite poor, and her mother had had an obsession with the idea of a water shortage. I don't know where her mother got that from. Maybe her mother had had an incident some point in her life of having to deal with a water shortage. I just don't know, but drought or whatever, I really don't know. But her mother had an obsession with water, and they lived when she grew up. She was actually my dad's age. My dad went to school with her. When they were growing up, her mom was a single mother back in the 1940s, which was kind of unusual, you know. And they lived in the low-income housing, which in our hometown was a neighborhood called the Brickyard. The Brickyard. And that's where they lived, was in the Brickyard, which was all a real low-income housing, you know. Just a bunch of rough shacks, basically, that people lived in. Anyway, these shacks had no indoor plumbing, and there was a communal well from which everybody in the area would draw their water, and that was directly in front of their house. And all the neighbors used to wait until she would leave, until my landlady's mother would leave, when my landlady was a little girl, before they go up to get the water. And the reason they did that was because she'd come out of her shack with a shotgun and run them off if they tried to draw water from the well. So they'd wait for her not to be home, and then there'd be a mad dash to go up there and get their water. So they didn't risk getting shot, basically, trying to draw water from the well. Anyway, our landlady had that same obsession. And when we first moved in there, we were actually the first trailer in the trailer park. We were the first mobile home in there. When I first saw that property where the mobile home park is now, because it's still there, but when I first saw it, that's where they had their race horses grazing. It was a pasture, is what it was. That there were horses where the trailer park is now. Anyway, I remember going out there with my dad in 1972 to see her husband, the landlord, and when he was planning to do this, to make this trailer park anyway. And my dad knew him because he had worked with him at a company called Beach Industries in Smiths Falls, which made toolboxes and mailboxes and so on. Anyway, when we first came there, the water pump for the house and also for the trailer park, as it was all drawn from the same well and going for the same pump, was in the basement of the house. And it was a great big old cast iron thing with a great big wheel and a lever belt and everything on it. It was from the 1920s. And it eventually blew up. It was just so old and probably couldn't take the extra stress of being running all the time to supply the trailer park with water too, and it blew up. But what she would do is whenever she heard that pump come on in the basement, and this pump would shake the whole house. You'd actually feel the floor vibrating under your feet if you were in the kitchen and the pump came on. If she heard that pump come on, she'd get on the telephone and she'd call every resident in the trailer park and ask, are you using the water? And if she found out who was using the water, she'd rip a strip off them anyway. There were rules that you couldn't have a garden, you couldn't have a garden hose, you couldn't have a little kiddie wading pool or whatever. You couldn't wash your car in your yard. That was against the rules too. Anything to do with water you couldn't do, eh? Now there was plenty of water, but she just had that fear. It was just right in her, that fear that the well was going to run dry, Anyway, yeah. There was one time one of our neighbors, now this is kind of funny, she had a garden, a back garden behind her house. She collected rainwater for the garden. And there was an old outhouse in the backyard too, in the garden, just when you walk down into the garden, there was an outhouse there. And the back of the outhouse actually was pointing towards the trailer park. And one of our neighbors that lived directly across from this outhouse, he got a hold of an old length of garden hose, and he stuck one end in under the skirting of his trailer. It wasn't connected to anything, and he just dragged it across his lawn so that she'd see it. And she got into that outhouse. She spent a week in that outhouse watching through a knothole. You see the eyeball in the knothole. And she was watching, waiting for him to turn the water on so she could jump out of there and nail him, come across there to where he was and just really let him have it, But anyway, he let her sweat for about a week. Every day she was in the outhouse watching through a knothole, And then after a week, he just pulled the hose out from under the siding, the skirting or whatever. He says, "Well, I think the old girl's had enough," and he just coiled it all up and put it away, But yeah, I remember that though. That was something just for a prank. He did that, to get her going, and he had her worried. I'll tell you. Anyway, when the pump blew up, her husband decided the pump was no longer going to be in the house where she could hear it all the time, so he built a pump house in the trailer park, and he put the pump in the pump house. But he didn't put a door on the pump house. So what she would do is, she'd go and she'd sit on a lawn chair in the pump house, and whenever the pump came on, you'd see her running across the trailer park over to her house, and she'd go into her house and she'd start calling everybody in the trailer park, asking who was using the water. Now, he eventually put a door on the pump house so she couldn't sit in the pump house anymore. So then she'd sit on a lawn chair outside the pump house, and of course it was just like a plywood shed, basically. So, you'd still hear the pump running if you were sitting outside it. So it didn't really stop her from doing that anyway. But yeah, these are just some of the stories anyway about my landlady. She loved animals, had lots of dogs and cats and everything, and horses and so on. Later on in life she had donkeys. Like, she's passed away now. Both her and her husband both have passed away. Her husband was an awful prankster though. And when my dad worked with him at Beach Industries at the factory in Smiths Falls, this fella, he played a real good prank anyway. There was an old fella used to come in early in the morning before the production workers came, and he would clean the offices and the washrooms and, the lunchroom and all that. Anyway, it was an old farmer that would do that for a little extra income, kind of semi-retired farmer. Anyway, what happened was, our future landlord at that time, he wasn't our landlord yet, his name was Jerry. I'll tell you that. His first name was Jerry. I don't want to use people's names too much, but his name was Jerry. Jerry, what he did is, he took a pair of boots, these high work boots, and he put them in front of a toilet in one of the stalls in the men's washroom. And then he locked the door from the inside, and then he shimmied out under the door. So the door was still locked, and these work boots were sitting there in front of the toilet. And when you walked into the washroom, you'd just see these boots, like somebody was sitting, it looked like somebody was sitting on the toilet in there. Now, early in the morning, when the old farmer came in to do the cleaning, there shouldn't have been anybody in there. Well, the old farmer, he come in early the next morning, and he sees the boots, and he thinks that somebody is hiding in there, somebody's broke into the factory, and they're hiding now in the stall in the washroom. So he calls the police. And for 45 minutes, the Smiths Falls police had that washroom under siege. They were actually pointing a revolver, one of them was, at the stall door and trying to talk the guy in there into coming out. Of course, they weren't getting any answer. So eventually they got fed up and they kicked the stall door in, and it was just a set of boots, you know. But 45 minutes they were there pointing a gun at the stall door and talking to just to an empty pair of boots. Anyway, it was kind of funny. That was Jerry that did that. Anyway, Jerry was always doing things like that. But very quick-witted was Jerry, He was a real character too. Anyway, that's just a little bit anyway about our old landlord and landlady. I'm probably going to run out of time here soon, so I'll stop here. But yeah, quite a thing. Oh, when they first put the trailer park in, this is another story. They did a survey. Now, the next door neighbor, I'll tell you his name anyway. The next door neighbor was a fellow by the name of Dick Cooch. Believe it or not, that was his name, Dick Cooch. And he had a taxi company. He actually had taxi cabs. It was called Cooch's Taxi. Anyway, when they did the survey to put the trailer park in, they found out that Dick Cooch's kitchen was a foot across the property line. Well, our landlady decided she was going to squeeze Dick Cooch for a lot of money because they could have forced Dick to tear his kitchen down, because technically it was encroaching on their property. Anyway, she thought she was going to do that. And Jerry, he just went over quietly. And in those days, the man was the boss, so the man could do this. He went over quietly and he had a word with Dick Cooch, with Mr. Cooch. And he said, look, just give me $1. Just give me $1 and it's yours, Because there had to be money change hands to make it legal. So Dick Cooch gave him $1 and he sold Dick that strip of land that his kitchen was on for $1. Rather than get into a big fight with the neighbors and so on. Anyway, when his wife, our landlady, when she found out what he did, she was furious because she could have really squeezed him for a lot of money, Could have really squeezed Dick Cooch for a lot of money. And anyway, it ended up that she didn't speak to our landlord, to her husband, Jerry, for a year. She was so mad at him. Jerry used to say it was the best year of his married life, really, but that's what he used to say. That was the best year of his married life, Anyway, just some stories that I remember anyway from when I was growing up, People were quite the characters back then. We got characters now. We had characters back then too, Anyway, that's it for now. We'll talk to you later.